Hi, my name is Steve Motton, Technical Architect at Project Leadership Associates. Today I'm here to talk to you about StorSimple and hybrid storage solutions and how this type of storage can be used in the enterprise to solve various use cases. Let's start with some StorSimple fundamentals. StorSimple connects Windows, Linux, VMware servers to Azure storage. With Azure on the back end, we're provided with capacity on demand. Now let's take a look at the big picture. Going from left to right on the screen, using iSCSI to communicate with the StorSimple appliance, we communicate with Azure over the internet, and then in the cloud in the data center, we have our blob storage, a StorSimple virtual appliance for dev and DR, as well as StorSimple Manager for managing our StorSimple environment. On our next slide, let's take a look at the Series 8000 models and the capacity that they use and what you get with each model. On our first model, we have the 8100, which the difference between the 8100 and the 8600 will be the usable storage capacity and the form factor. You can see the storage capacity, you can get up to 45 terabytes on the 8100 and up to 120 terabytes on the 8600. The form factor on the 8100 model is at 2U, and the form factor on the 8600 model is at 4U. Our StorSimple appliance is also fault tolerance. If you look at our next slide, you can see that we have dual controllers, redundant power supplies, redundant network interfaces. We're also provided with controllers for failover purposes, storage space protection in case of a drive failure, and a non-disruptive software upgrade to the OS with no downtime. With our StorSimple appliance, we're also provided with local and geo-redundant storage. The data protection for data in the cloud, we get 3 copies of data across separate fault domains, which prevents against partial or complete data center failure. We have an asynchronous replication between Azure data centers and failover to alternate locations determined by Azure operations. We're also provided with automatic tiering. So how does data move through the StorSimple appliance? At tier 1, which is empty in the very beginning, then next we have the data which is written to the start of the free space. Once it sees the high watermark, then the data is spilled over to the next tier. And then once that tier is completely full, the tier returns to a low watermark level. We also have deduplication at the SSD level. And once the data is deduped, we also have compression on top of the deduplication. And that deduped and compressed data is also encrypted. On our next screen, you can see how the data is secured throughout this entire StorSimple solution. As you can see, our data is secure on the appliance itself, and then on-premise, and that's on-premise in the data center. And then once it's in flight to Azure, you also have AES 256-bit encryption. The StorSimple virtual appliance can be used for DR and dev and test scenarios. StorSimple Manager provides workflows for DR and clone workflows when replicating production environments in the cloud. Again, remember the virtual appliance is a software version of the physical appliance that runs in Azure that can be provisioned and turned on as needed. The StorSimple appliance provides for local snapshots. The local snapshots are limited by the amount of space that you have on the local appliance. Cloud snapshots are stored in Azure, where metadata is kept in its entirety and the only change blocks are copied on subsequent cloud backups. Now let's take a look at some of the StorSimple use cases. Let's start with DR. What's needed in a DR scenario are cloud snapshots and a secondary data center, or we can take advantage of the Azure virtual appliance that we mentioned earlier. As we can see from the screenshot below, our primary data center is down. In this case, now either using a secondary appliance at a secondary data center or recovery in Azure from a virtual appliance, we can use our snapshots to recover our data. So let's look at file shares and archives. From our before picture, we can see in StorSimple you have your primary storage, archive storage, disk-based backup storage, and tape infrastructure. In our after diagram, we see that we have the StorSimple appliance taking place of our on-premise storage, the primary data in Azure providing capacity in the backend on demand. In our next diagram, we look at a SharePoint solution. In a similar solution as we looked at before, the before solution we have our primary storage, archival storage, disk-based backup storage, and tape infrastructure, and an offsite facility. When we look at the after picture, once we've implemented the StorSimple appliance taking place, we see that takes our on-premise footprint, and then we have our capacity on demand in the back end, our cloud storage, Azure, handling the blob storage. Now let's take a look at virtual machines, which also can eliminate VM sprawl. In our before picture for StorSimple, we see our primary storage, our archive storage, disk-based backup storage, tape, and infrastructure. On the after picture, you're using Tier 2, Tier 3 data, which can take advantage of our on-premise StorSimple device as well as our Azure storage. And on our final screen, we'll take a look at SQL. And just as we did with the VMs, the SQL Tier 2 and Tier 3 applications are also handled with an on-premise StorSimple appliance footprint, with the Azure Cloud Component handling cloud data and DR functions in the background. Thank you for attending today's session. My name is Steve Motton. You can reach me at smotton@projectleadership.net and on Twitter at Stephen Motton. Thank you.